Dear friends, Peter, Sam and Sir Handel had a lot of work to do when Skarloey left to be mended, but they were never lonely. Peter Sam found an old friend of the railway, and even the owner brought in 2 more engines. These stories tell you what happened, and even one story that Duncan wished had stayed a secret: the author.
Peter, Sam, and Sir Handel had a lot of work after Skarloey and Rheneas had both gone away to be mended. Sir Handel grumbled into the shed one evening. "Gordon doesn't pull both. Trucks and I aren't made to mingle. So what do they make me do?"
"Be a useful engine?"
Peter Sam answered innocently. "No. They make me pull coaches and trucks. It really isn't proper. Those old coaches don't make it any easier with their complaining."
"I don't mind it."
"Is there anything you do mind?"
"It sounds like..."
Sir Handel cut Peter Sam off. "Why can't the manager just let them roll down the hill? The line is steep enough." Peter Sam frowned at him.
"Wagons will get smashed if you let them roll by themselves."
"They have brakes, don't they?" argued Sir Handel.
"You'd think so, but that won't always stop them."
"They'll get a little wear and tear, but nothing serious."
"Shall I tell you how serious it can be?"
Sir Handel grunted. "What would you know?"
"Skarloey once told me a story about it."
He rolled his eyes. "All right, get on with it." And so, Peter Sam began to recall the story. It was one particularly cold day when Skarloey arrived at the bottom station. He had arranged his trucks and decided to have a rest. All of a sudden, the wind picked up and Skarloey shivered. "This weather is freezing me to my frames. Can't I get back to my shed?" All of a sudden, one of the workmen started yelling behind Skarloey, and he looked to see a wagon seemingly rolling by itself. The wagon was quickly braked to a stop. "How did that get loose?" "Wind's playing with them," replied one of the men. This then gave Skarloey an idea. "That's just the ticket." He explained his idea to the workmen and was surprised when he found they liked it. "It'll be fun," said one of them. "It might even be quicker," came another. "I'll do anything to keep warm." And so it was arranged. Skarloey and the men would try it next time a goods came down. The idea was simple. Drag wagons to the top of the wharf and let them roll one at a time. The rest would switch the points and direct the trucks onto the right lines. The first lot of wagons were released, and Skarloey started shouting orders at the men. They all thought it was fun, until they all heard a demanding voice.
"And just what is going on here?"
"Sir?" Skarloey was surprised. In the sudden confusion, a brakeman didn't react in time. As he leaped clear, there was a terrible crashing sound. One of the trucks had fallen off the wharf and broken the slate. The thin controller was unimpressed, scolding the men and Skarloey.
"My wharf is not a hump shunting yard, and I won't have this reckless nonsense."
It took some time for the men to clear up the broken slate, and for the truck to be recovered from the tracks of the big railway. When all was fixed, Skarloey and the workmen carried on shunting normally. Skarloey was ashamed. He returned to the shed and tried to explain to the thin controller. "The idea was mine, sir. Please don't get the men into trouble."
"The men should know better."
the manager stated.
And so should you, Skarloey. Rheneas shall do the work and you shall be kept in the shed until I can trust you.
He turned on his heel and walked away. Rheneas looked at his friend.
I'm sure your idea was clever, Skarloey, but we mustn't be so reckless. He knew Rheneas was right and went to sleep.
Peter Sam finished glumly. Sir Handel wasn't moved.
That's all well and good, but a broken wagon isn't very serious.
Wait until you hear what happened to Rheneas, came a voice. Mr. Hugh walked up to the two engines. Sir Handel looked puzzled.
What happened to him then?
Do tell us, sir,
piped Peter Sam. Mr. Hugh grinned.
Well, listen carefully, and I will.
Sir Handel and Peter Sam stayed quiet and listened.
Wharf Shunting. Rheneas and Skarloey had been kept in the shed for the rest of the winter. Mr. Hugh started. It coated everything in the yard with frost and ice. I was explaining to the engines in the shed that evening. The line's in good condition, he started, but the points at the bottom station are frozen solid. They needed replacing anyway. Rheneas looked dismayed, but it was Skarloey that spoke up. Will we have to cancel our train, sir? Mr. Hugh frowned. We may have to if we can't get them fixed. It was Rheneas who spoke next. We don't have to. We can use gravity, he stated proudly, before explaining his idea to Skarloey and Mr. Hugh. When leaving the wharf, there's a thin, narrow bridge and a sharp hill that all the engines have to climb. We push the coaches up the hill, Rheneas explained, moving into the siding. The coaches will roll past us. It's just like with the trucks. Skarloey was impressed, and Mr. Hugh agreed to it. However, the coaches had overheard and were offended. Agnes interjected from the shed. Am I to be treated like a common slate wagon? If it keeps the trains running, Rheneas teased. Agnes didn't find it funny and brooded to herself all night. The next morning, the coaches were being difficult and held back as Rheneas pulled them to the platform to be cleaned out. Unfortunately for Rheneas, one of Agnes's doors had not been properly closed and swung freely as he pushed the coaches to the bridge. As they rounded the curve to the point, Agnes's door swung open. There came a shout, "Stop! Look out!" Rheneas jerked to a halt before Agnes's door could be ripped off its hinges. Whew, that was a near thing, Rheneas said to himself. The coaches, however, were very cross. He calls us trucks and tries to rip our doors off. There's nothing for it now, we'll pay him out. Skarloey felt sorry and kept the coaches in high spirits by playing little games when it was his turn out. You won't catch me, you won't catch me, he would chortle as he rolled down the hill. They'd jokingly chant back, yes we will, as they slid past. Rheneas was less jovial and would park the coaches at the top of the hill before running safely into the siding and letting them roll past him. No nonsense, Rheneas would always say. We've got to be careful in this weather. This gave Agnes an idea, and she told the others her plan. Ruth, Jemima, Lucy, and Beatrice agreed. That'll teach 'em. Beatrice's brakes were always screwed on tight in the cold conditions to make sure there were no runaways. But as the weather relaxed, so did the guard. The coaches were taken out of their shed for the first train. This is where Agnes enacted her plan. Rheneas parked them at the top of the hill and uncoupled. He started rolling down into the loop when he heard a sudden, "Go on, girls!" Then it happened. The coaches surged forward. They jolted and stopped, but Agnes kept rolling on towards them. In an instant, she hit Ruth, who jumped the track and smashed into Agnes. The first-class coach was very bruised. Her woodwork was smashed, and Ruth's buffers had been bent out of shape. Rheneas and the other coaches were unhurt, but the manager was very annoyed and told Agnes as such. "You are a very disobedient coach," scolded the manager. "But sir, it was all Rheneas's fault. Be quiet. I shall hear none of it. If you can't behave, I'll have your cushions taken away and make you third class like the others." They left Agnes on a siding, feeling very sorry for herself, and Rheneas went up the line with the remaining coaches. The poor coach apologized later that night. "Rheneas," Agnes whispered, "I'm sorry I caused such a mess." The old engine smiled. "I'm sorry too. I never really meant to offend you." Rheneas continued, "Mr. Hugh says the weather will be better soon. They'll have you and the points fixed in no time." Agnes smiled. She hoped she'd never have to run by gravity again. "And that," finished Mr. Hugh, "is why we don't let trucks and coaches run amok on gravity." "Thank you for telling us, sir," said Peter Sam. Sir Handel didn't say anything. He just stared at his buffers. Mr. Hugh chuckled at him. "So mind you take care when taking the coaches out, or else they might chase down on you too." Sir Handel doesn't really talk about gravity trains anymore. He says they're silly things for silly engines.
It was early one morning, and the engines were being warmed up for the day. Sir Handel noticed the Thing controller with a large group of men arriving at the shed. The group were wearing very smart uniforms and a beret adorning their heads. What's going on this time? Some sort of special occasion?
Surprisingly, no.
Not from what I
Some
think.
reason.
This is news to me, believe it or not. The little engine was very impressed. Who might these gentlemen be, sir? Sir Handel asked in a regal tone.
These are Army cadets. Because of the current track condition, they've agreed to help relay the line.
Sir Handel smiled at the men. He had a great respect for the military. The Thing controller spoke again.
Since you're the first in steam, you'll be taking the cadets up with the maintenance train.
It would be my honor, sir. He was very excited. He was humbled when the men gave him a good polish. Peter Sam had awoken and was very confused. What were those people, Sir Handel? Peter Sam asked. Sir Handel quickly explained. The Thing controller has chosen me to take him up the line. Peter Sam was about to speak.
But I didn't know you decided to
You must know that a respectable engine has to take respectable people.
Does that mean I'm not respectable?
Peter Sam quizzed. Sir Handel stammered. Oh, no. Of course you are, my dear engine. But I'm better. It's perfect for the job. Peter Sam just rolled his eyes. Sir Handel was more often than not the cause of bumps in the track. Sir Handel was soon ready to set off, and made his way to the yard where he found the cadets had shunted his train and were all ready. Their sergeant was giving them orders, and the cadets all obeyed without fault. Sir Handel was confused, but mesmerized by it all.
It does not take this long to get here on. He's gonna whistle in about 3, 2, 1,
And there he is! Okay, cool. Okay, considering the events today. penalty soon because of something when I'm doing a little thrown insult. That's my first concern.
Take care.
There
We
it
don't
is.
want you causing more damage than repairs.
Idiot. Chuffs were rhythmic. They kept exactly a time and stuck by the speed limit to a T. Left, right. Sir Handel chuffed to himself. The little engine was getting quite a taste for militaristic life.
Sir Handel, is that you saying that?
Asked his driver. Well, I didn't say anything. Sir Handel stammered. When they arrived at the first spot along the line, his driver was surprised that they had arrived earlier than expected.
Hey, this is how he performs when the cadets are about. Maybe we should invite them onto all his trains.
Laughed his fireman. Before long, the section was relayed and rebalanced. Quickly, the sergeant was ordering the cadets back onto the train, and they were off again. They soon arrived at the mill station and were now waiting for Peter Sam to arrive with his passenger train. Soon enough, he showed up.
They've done an outstanding job.
He cheered to Sir Handel.
Hopefully you can keep your rough riding under wraps so the track can stay like that.
Sir Handel blew off steam. How dare you! I won't have you insulting me like that! Do you hear me? Peter Sam just chuckled as his passengers boarded.
I'm telling you,
Sir Handel continued, if you don't straighten yourself out, you'll be in trouble.
What? Pardon?
Peter Sam was understandably confused. This went on for quite some time. But after a while, Peter Sam set off and eventually the line was clear for Sir Handel and the men. But he was still angry. Rough riding indeed, rough riding indeed, he muttered to himself. Unfortunately for Sir Handel, he was thinking so much about what he would say next to Peter Sam, he wasn't looking at the track.
They won't do the rails any good if you keep screwing them out.
This was the final straw for Sir Handel. Unfortunately, Sir Handel was so pent up in his anger he didn't realize what he was doing. Until it was too late.
Happy place, can you kill it? For one day. One day!
The cadets all got out to survey the damage. Meanwhile, their sergeant was giving Sir Handel an earful of how a proper engine would handle a task like this.
How are we supposed to get him back on?
Asked one of the gets.
Relaying jacks,
Answered another. The guard got out with bad news.
I'm afraid we don't have any jacks on us. There is only enough room for the maintenance tools.
Then, the cadets all stared at the rails and sleepers on the trucks. They spoke with their sergeant, who agreed. Much to Sir Handel's surprise, the men started to hold him up and relay new rails underneath him. The rails have been spare part underneath them, said a cadet. Well then, started the sergeant. We'll just have to relay them, won't we? Soon they were able to put him down onto the brand new track. Sir Handel was apologetic to the cadets and the sergeant. When he got back, he apologized to the Think Controller. Much to Sir Handel's dismay, the story had gotten back to the shed before him. Peter Sam, trying to stifle a giggle as Sir Handel reversed into the shed. No blowing off steam in the yard limits, barked Peter Sam. Even Mr. Hugh joined in. Slow down, Sir Handel. Manager won't like you going too fast. Sir Handel stayed quiet and didn't think of ordering anyone about for at least a whole week. But I think his mind was elsewhere. Don't you?
Mainline engines always boast how big they are, superior by far. But little engines toil away from dawn to dusk, without a fuss or care. Just because we're small doesn't mean we don't stand tall, and we pull our weight like all the others do. You'll be surprised, in spite of our size, just what little engines can do. Little engines, little engines,
extended engine.
Wake up, lazy bones! Here's my coat.
Can't do it. Noisy trucks go with engine backs.
I won't.
Oh, I have stopped.
I can't be kept waiting, you know.
The old coaches were feeling ill. They would creak and groan as Sir Handel pulled them along. Sir Handel was dismissive, and he would say,
"Oh, it's just your coming of age. It was always going to happen. Oh, it's normal. You're just that age."
But Peter Sam was very worried. The problem became so bad that Mr. Hugh had to inspect them one day.
"Oh, wood rot," he reported. "Agnes is fine, but I don't trust the others on our bumpy track."
Agnes was glad to be in good health, but felt bad for her sisters.
"Oh, well, I'm dreadfully sorry, girls. Oh, I do hope you'll get well soon. You'll get well soon, won't you?"
But Agnes was wrong.
"I am sent to say,"
started the thin controller,
"that Ruth, Lucy, Jemima, and Beatrice will not be able to come out for a while. It is for that reason," he continued, "that Agnes, Gertrude, and Millicent will carry the passengers for the time being."
"Oh, yes, sir."
"Yes, sir,"
the two engines answered. Some days later, it was Peter Sam's turn to pull the train, and he went,
"Come along, come along. Come along, come along."
Agnes came along nicely, but Gertrude and Millicent were skeptical.
Oh, Peter Sam's all right,"
they whispered to each other.
"But Sir Handel is better. He knows how to treat us."
Agnes was taken aback, but Peter Sam was going so nicely he hadn't heard a word of this. The platform was crowded with happy tourists. They quickly piled into the coaches.
"Oh, we can't fit anymore," the guard announced. You'll have to come back later, you will. So there."
When the last of the disappointed passengers had left the station, they were nearly ready to set off.
"Oh, if only we had Beatrice,"
Peter Sam said longingly.
"We could always fit more passengers in her."
"Oh, yes."
"I'm just as good as Beatrice,"
put in Millicent.
"I could get a few extra passengers myself."
"Oh, I should hope not,"
said the guard as he climbed aboard. Peter Sam had to laugh.
"It wouldn't be right to lock the guard in such a
claustrophobic.
Yes, a claustrophobic cupboard,"
Peter Sam finished.
"Humph,"
went Millicent.
"I'm no claustrophobic. I'm perfectly spacious."
Both Gertrude and Millicent were very upset and wanted to get their own back. At the middle station is a small post office. It's run by the station master's wife. She was waiting impatiently for Peter Sam with a large crate. The fireman waved a greeting as he went by. He went,
"Oh, good morning, Miss..."
"There's no time for how do you do," she interrupted. "I need you to take this to the refreshment lady."
"Oh, I'm afraid we can't," said the driver. "There's barely room for another passenger."
It was then that Peter Sam noticed something.
"Oh, what about that?"
he said. Sitting in an overgrown siding was an old red truck with mail wagon painted on the side. It had been used a lot in the old days, but fell out of use when the post office opened.
"It looks rather sturdy,"
said Peter Sam.
"I'm sure we could use it."
The driver scratched his head.
"Oh, I'm not sure if the thing controller would approve, but well, we've no other option, have we? No.
Quite no. And so the men wheeled it to the end of the train.
What on earth are you doing? Millicent shrieked.
We're making space for the refreshment lady's package, Peter Sam answered cheerily.
Surely I could carry the package, she protested. A truck like that ought to be carrying coal or stones or perhaps workers to the mine.
Oh, come off it now, the guard said. We don't have time. You don't have space. No, you don't.
Millicent tried and tried to argue, but the guard blew his whistle and they left before she could say anything else. Peter Sam was being very careful as they climbed.
Oh, it's a special little wagon it is. I wonder if the thin controller will let me keep it.
The coaches didn't agree.
Oh, not likely.
Oh, not likely at all.
They suddenly hit a bump in the track. Millicent and Gertrude had a horrible jerk.
Oh, you horrid engine, Millicent screamed.
But this gave her a naughty idea, and she whispered it to Gertrude.
That's brilliant,
came a hushed reply. If the pair of them had been thinking clearly, they'd know how silly it was. But they didn't care, and simply bided their time. The guards said that Millicent put her brakes on too hard. Millicent said
the filthy wagon was joyriding on the track,
and the poor wagon was too dazed to say anything. Even so, it happened. A sheep suddenly leapt on the line just in front of Peter Sam. He whistled sharply. This was the signal for the two coaches. Agnes slowed, but Gertrude nudged into Millicent, and Millicent surged into the truck. It bounced off her buffers, bobbed along the sleepers, and crashed into the side of the line.
Oh! Cinders and ashes, Peter Sam cried. Oh, what happened?
Gertrude and Millicent were very pleased with themselves. That was until the guard went to check the box. He peered in and then groaned. When he stood back up, he was holding pieces of broken glass, covered in fresh jam.
Oh dear,
whimpered Millicent.
The refreshment lady won't be happy,
said the guard knowingly. And she wasn't. Peter Sam and the coaches all stayed on the rails, and they cleared up as much mess as they could. When the refreshment lady found a package, she stormed straight to Peter Sam's cab and gave the crew an earful, but they had wisely scuppered off with their engine. So she turned her attention to the guard. He locked himself inside his compartment.
Nobody's home.
Gertrude, Millicent, and poor old Agnes were left to face her alone. The two bogey coaches were left in no doubt about their position. But that wasn't all. When they got back to the carriage shed, Agnes and the thin controller gave them one for two. Oh, but they soon learned sense, and are now sensible coaches, if nothing more. And as for Peter Sam, well, he was applauded for his quick thinking. Mr. Hughes surprised him a week later. The mail wagon was repaired, repainted, and as good as new. The little engine was over the moon, and he went, oh, thank you so very much, sir. I'm going to take it on all my trains from now on. And he was true to his word. When the platforms are crowded, the wagon helps carry passengers. But it much prefers to take parcels and letters to all the locals.
Oh, here comes Peter Sam. Look at him, look at him. Oh, there he is, look.
The villagers would always say when they saw him. And Peter Sam would never forget to whistle a cheerful in return.
Rusty had had an accident. He'd slipped on some wet rails and broke something. The men helped push him back home. A rest in the shed will do you good. It was a quiet afternoon. Peter Sam was in the back of the shed after his accident with the slate trucks. Sir Handel was taking the passengers, and Duncan was doing his work. Rusty was bored. "I hope everyone is having fun," he said quietly. "More fun than I'm having, at any rate." The little diesel tried humming to himself, but couldn't catch a tune. Then he tried counting everything he saw, but when a farmer went past with a flock of sheep, his eyes grew tired, and the little diesel fell asleep. Later, some boys asked the thin controller if they could see the sheds. Rusty was still drowsy when they came and looked about him and inside his cab, but Rusty paid no mind. And when they left, he went back to sleep. A few minutes later, Rusty could feel something walking around his wheels and then standing on his buffers. Rusty was going to ignore it until he heard something that made him open his eyes. There, in front of Rusty, was a small cat. "Oh, you can't stay here," Rusty yawned. "It's not safe for a small cat to be in a busy yard." "Well, it would normally be busy, but you still can't stay." The cat meowed softly and walked about his front. "You're quite a scruffy little cat. Where did you come from?" The cat just ignored him and jumped down. Rusty couldn't see her anymore, but was relieved when he felt the cat was resting on the seat in his cab. "You be careful," Rusty said worriedly. "I'd hate it if you hurt yourself." But he knew there was no danger when he heard quiet purring. Rusty breathed a sigh of relief and, happy to have some company, he closed his eyes again and went to sleep with his new friend. That night, the engines all returned home and were cooling down for the night. Sir Handel was complaining about the day as the others begrudgingly listened. "Those blasted sheep! They know they shouldn't be there, but standing about not even looking me in the eye." "Probably because looking at you would spoil their appetite," Peter Sam said with a smirk. The other engines chuckled, but Sir Handel just fumed under his breath. The talking died down, and they all drifted to sleep. Duncan was woken up in the middle of the night by a noticeable purring and quiet meowing noise. He turned his attention to where the noise was coming from, and his eyes focused on their number 5. "I think Rusty's losing it," he stated, loudly, waking the other engines. "What?" "He's acting like a cat. His radiator must have cracked." Peter Sam looked over, and it was true. He could hear purring coming from Rusty. The little diesel opened an eye to find the others staring at him. "Is everything all right?" The engines were confused when they could still hear the noises and started talking loudly about what it could be. The cat had walked out of his cab and was now laying in front of Rusty, and the engines finally understood. "She showed up earlier today, and I couldn't get her to leave," he explained. "So she stayed with me." Peter Sam was wide-eyed and adoring the little creature as she got up and started wandering about the other engines. "Is that a smile, Duncan?" remarked Sir Handel. "Of course it's a smile," he snapped. "We just never see you with one. That's because none of you are as cute as this little fella. Hey!" The engines were interrupted by a commanding voice. "Settle down!" The thin controller had been woken up by their shouting and had walked over to the shed to find out what the commotion was. "May we keep her, sir?" Peter Sam said quickly. "I don't think we can," said a disappointed Rusty. "But why not?" "Because," interrupted the thin controller, "a railway yard is no place for an animal." "But, sir, we keep Duncan, don't we?" Peter Sam chuckled. All except Duncan roared into laughter. The thin controller smiled, but still wasn't sure what to do with the cat. "I'll have to take her with me until we can figure out what to do with her." The cat was taken to Mr. Sam's house, and his children took great care of her. Both they and the rest of the engines grew attached to the cat and begged Mr. Sam not to get rid of her. "We'll take good care of her. Oh, please let her stay." He soon relented, and now the cat lives at Mr. Sam's house, just next to the railway. Rusty named her Dillis. She will often come visit him when the yards are empty and stop him from being lonely. Passengers passing by would often remark how strange it was. Rusty would always smile and tell them, "She may not say much, but she's good company all the same."
When Peter Sam had his accident with the slate trucks, the owner bought a new engine. They called him Duncan, and soon he was put to work with the others. Whilst Rusty would take the workmen to repair the line, Duncan and Sir Handel managed the passenger trains. They took them up to the lake in the morning and brought them home in the evenings. The trains were heavy and would often run late. Sir Handel wasn't bothered, but Duncan was cross and took it out on poor Rusty.
All day we're doing real work, and he trundles about with his tiny train of trucks, getting in the way.
Peter Sam was shocked. Rusty is doing an important job, and don't you forget it.
Important? Bah! You treat that diesel like a hero, Duncan scoffed. Engines should be engines, not fleeing around saving cats.
You'd find yourself in a field instead of the station without Rusty, said Sir Handel knowingly. What would you do then?
Take a well-earned rest,
Duncan snapped, and he went to sleep. But the next day there was trouble. Sir Handel felt an awful pain. His driver looked him over, searching top to bottom and everywhere else.
Seems your accident with the cadets did more damage than we thought.
Sir Handel frowned. They soon explained the situation to Duncan.
"I'll take 'em both our trains," he spluttered. "Don't be ridiculous. It can't be helped. We have to keep the trains running." Rusty tried to calm him. "Don't worry, Duncan. We've been working very hard to get the rails as smooth as satin." Duncan rolled his eyes.
"Like that'll make a difference,"
he said under his breath. Unfortunately, it didn't. Duncan's trains got longer and heavier. He would run late, and the passengers would blame him for it. He would grumble, "This train is too heavy, I get no rest. This train is too heavy, I get no rest." He would always try to make up the time, but would bucket and bounce along the track. It seemed to him that Rusty hadn't fixed any of it. One evening, Duncan stood at the top station waiting with a full train. The rails were wet and had made the up journey difficult. He couldn't wait to get back to the shed.
"Rusty was supposed to be helping," Duncan scoffed, "but I've been hitting bump after bump."
"Rusty is trying to fix the bumps you're making. If you didn't do your rock and roll, we wouldn't have a problem."
"Pah, he's not focusing on the right bumps."
The guard's whistle blew, and Duncan, whooshing steam, stormed away. Duncan made heavy work of the return journey.
"I want to get home, I want to get home," he puffed.
They steamed into the tunnel, and when Duncan got out, the rain started pouring.
"Easy journey from here," he thought to himself.
They stopped at the middle station, but when he tried to leave, his wheels slipped furiously on the rails.
Come on, come on, come on, I want to go, I want to go."
Duncan was determined to get home, and soon got the coaches moving. As they rolled down the line, he could see where Rusty and the men had been working. Duncan whistled to no one in particular.
"Typical lazy diesels, nowhere to be seen,"
and he steamed gamely on. However, Rusty hadn't been lazy. With all of Duncan's bucks and bounces, there was one section of the line the men had never been able to get right. Rusty would always warn the engines about it.
"I can handle myself, I know my way."
His crew held on for dear life as Duncan rocked and rolled around the corner. The driver clutched his regulator and the fireman lunged for the brake. But to his horror, the brake handle came clean off his hand, leaving Duncan helpless to stop. Quickly, Duncan picked up speed. He didn't realize what had happened until he tried to slow down. He tried whistling to get the guard's attention, but the wind blew his whistles up and around, only leaving the guard confused. Without help from the brake van, Duncan slid helplessly towards the big station, but for all his rough riding, Duncan could in fact handle himself. He knew there was only one thing he could do, and without hesitation, he shot steam from his funnel, and his wheels spun forward.
"I've got to slow down, I need to slow down,"
he cried as he pushed against the coaches. He made such a noise that the guard finally took notice. The van's brakes came on hard and screeched as the train rumbled under the bridge and past the shed. They were frantic, but with a jolt and a thud, Duncan's rear wheels left the track and dug into the ground.
"I have to stop, I need to stop,"
Duncan whimpered. "It's all right, boy," his driver consoled. "We've stopped." No one was hurt, and all the passengers got out of the coaches, bemused at the sudden stop. Duncan was badly shaken, and soon started to feel harassed by the passengers crowding around. "Make your way to the platform, please," the guard insisted, before shepherding them away. None of them minded the crash. Duncan had arrived early for once. It was only after the last passenger had gone that the thin controller came to survey the damage. He looked Duncan up and down, shook his head, and silently walked away. "It's all right, boy," his driver soothed. "You did your best." He was soon back on the rails and shunted his coaches into the yard. His crew spent the afternoon mending his handbrake before heading home. The shed was quiet that night. None of the engines said a word to Duncan. He's a hard worker, they thought, but they weren't sure what to make of him. None of the engines learned Duncan's heroism. He thought it best to keep quiet. "I'm not a hero," he would insist to his crew. "I'm only an engine, and engines should be kept as engines." Even the passengers on board never realized what he did for them. But then passengers almost never do. But from that day to this, his driver and fireman never missed the chance to tell the story of their engine that saved the trains, the passengers, and himself. The railway's unsung hero.
No, I don't. Please don't.